Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make crazy cake. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and today I have a super easy recipe for you. This crazy cake recipe yields a moist, delicious chocolate cake, and it doesn't use any butter, it doesn't use any milk, and it doesn't use any eggs. This cake is really not my own invention. It was invented back during the Depression because it just uses pantry staples. So most likely you have everything you need in your pantry already. No trip to the grocery store required. Now, before you begin, you'll want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the first ingredient you need is 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I like to make my crazy cake in a large bowl, but one of the great things about this recipe is a lot of people just make it right in the dish that they're going to be baking the cake in. You can do that if you want. I'm going to be using a bowl today. Along with the flour, we're going to add 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1/3 cup of natural cocoa powder, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now whisk your ingredients together until everything is completely combined. And then make a well in the center of your ingredients. I'm just using a spoon to do this. So we're only going to be using one bowl to make this cake, so we're using that well to combine our wet ingredients. You're going to need 1 cup of water. You'll need 1/3 cup of oil. You can use vegetable oil or canola oil. You do want to use a neutral oil. A tablespoon of vinegar, and I'm using white vinegar, and just a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now we will whisk all of our ingredients together until the batter is nice and smooth. Start from the center, whisking my wet ingredients together, and then just slowly work outwards until everything is completely combined. So once your batter is smooth, we can go ahead and transfer it to our baking dish. Now you will need an 8x8 baking dish for this recipe. You could use a 9x9. Your cake will just be a little bit flatter if you do, and you'll need to bake it for a little less time. Now I recommend using a glass baking dish, and I'm just going to lightly grease this with a little bit of baking spray. You could use shortening instead, that would also be fine. Now pour your batter into your baking dish. Make sure you get all of that in there. Just love how easy it is to make this batter. There's no stand mixer required, no fancy ingredients. Takes just a couple seconds, only one dish. Love it. Now we'll take this over to our 350 degree Fahrenheit oven, and make sure your oven is completely preheated because this batter comes together so quickly, your oven might need a couple minutes to catch up to you. And once your oven is preheated, we'll bake this for about 30 to 35 minutes or until a toothpick inserted in the center comes out clean or with a few moist crumbs. Do not overbake this cake or it will be dry. You're going to want to let your cake cool completely before you cover it with frosting. Now, here's one thing I hate about so many of these wacky cake recipes is a lot of them do not have a frosting recipe that goes along with them. Sure, you can use any frosting. You can use my cream cheese frosting or my buttercream, but since we're making a cake that doesn't use any eggs or milk or butter, I wanted a frosting that also doesn't use any of those things. So we are going to be icing this with a pretty simple chocolate glaze. No eggs, milk, or butter, of course not eggs, required for this recipe. We're going to start with 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, add a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and 2 tablespoons of water. You might need a little bit more water, but we're going to start with 2 tablespoons. Now we'll just whisk everything together. If I used a bigger bowl, that would have made things a little bit easier for me. Looks like my whisk is struggling to handle this, so I'll switch over to a spoon. Now we're making a really thick, pretty rich chocolate glaze. Now this is definitely going to be a little bit too dry, so we're going to add another tablespoon of water. Now this is definitely too dry, so we're going to add just a little bit more water. Don't overdo it or you're going to end up needing to add more powdered sugar, and then it'll just be back and forth, more sugar, more water until you get the right consistency. So just a little bit of water at a time. What we're looking for is a pretty fudgy consistency. You want it to be a little bit stiff. You want it to kind of be like a spreadable frosting more than a very thin glaze. So just keep stirring until we get to that consistency. Does that look good to you? Because that looks pretty good to me. I think we're ready to ice our cake. Let me grab that. I'm going to use a spatula to pour this over the cake. Make sure I get all of that frosting on there. And look how fudgy and glossy that is. And then I'm just gonna gently nudge that frosting over the entire surface of the cake. And you do wanna do this gently because if you're too aggressive, since the frosting is so thick, it can actually pull up some of that cake and it won't look quite as pretty. Oh, I usually like to add a dash of salt in with this frosting too. Just gives it a little depth of flavor. It's not a deal breaker if you forget it like I did, but I really think it's a nice addition. Just about 1/8 of a teaspoon or even less. All right, that looks so good. So you could go ahead and dig in right away, but this glaze is still a little bit runny, so I'm going to let it set up and harden a little bit before I dig in. So once our frosting is set, let's go ahead and dig in. Hopefully you cut more even slices than I do. Oh man, before I even bite into this, can you guys see how fudgy and chocolatey and decadent this is? And there's no butter, and you guys know how I love using butter in everything. All right, if you guys try this recipe out, I would love to hear what you think. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Oh man, it's got a nice texture to it. It like melts in your mouth.